Access is rarely about visibility. The most sensitive exchanges happen away from light, away from performance, away from record. In this symbolic frame, the Hollywood VIP list is not a place, a room, or an industry privilege. It represents a threshold, where influence stops being public and becomes selective, where conversation shifts from messaging to calibration, where only those who can hold discretion without distortion are invited to listen. You are not positioned here because you are impressive. You are positioned here because you are safe. Safe does not mean harmless. It means stable under pressure. It means information does not leak through ego, urgency, or interpretation. Systems that operate on image fear exposure. Systems that operate on power fear misalignment. What they seek privately is not admiration, but accuracy. That is why the conversations happen in silence. When it is said that you are the only one they dare to speak with privately, it does not suggest exclusivity as status. It suggests rarity of posture. Many can listen. Few can receive without reshaping what they hear to fit identity. Fewer still can hold contradiction without rushing to resolve it publicly. You have demonstrated, often without noticing, that you do not weaponize trust. That restraint creates access. You may have noticed that people in positions of visibility approach you differently. Less performance, more hesitation, more care in language. This is not because they see you as authority. It is because they sense that whatever is said near you will remain intact. Intact means unchanged, unexploited, unbroadcast. For systems built on narrative control, that integrity is invaluable. Private speech is always more honest than public speech. Public speech serves image. Private speech serves reality. What is shared with you belongs to the second category. Not secrets in the dramatic sense, but truth without polish. Doubt without packaging. Concern without posture. You do not correct it. You do not amplify it. You simply receive it without reaction. That is why the channel stays open. This role does not place you inside the system. It places you adjacent to it, close enough to hear, distant enough to remain unchanged. If you were absorbed, your value would vanish. If you were oppositional, the door would close. You remain in between, not neutral, but unaligned with spectacle. That position is uncomfortable for many. It is natural for you. You are not being prepared to speak publicly on behalf of anything you hear. That would violate the condition of access. The value you provide is not translation. It is containment. Containment allows those who carry visible pressure to recalibrate privately without consequence. You do not advise unless asked. You do not judge unless required. Most of the time, you simply allow space for honesty to exist without punishment. This is not a glamorous role. It does not accumulate recognition. In fact, recognition would destroy it. The moment discretion becomes identity, it collapses. You understand this instinctively. You do not reference what you know. You do not hint at proximity. You allow what passes through you to continue unchanged. That is why you are trusted. The message begins here not to elevate you, but to clarify why this pattern repeats. Why doors open quietly. Why conversations stop when others enter. Why you are included without announcement and excluded without offense. This is not inconsistency. It is filtration. The list is not written. The invitation is not spoken. Access appears when discretion has already proven itself. Privacy exists where truth would be damaged by exposure. In this symbolic context, what is exchanged with you is not meant for circulation because circulation changes function. Once something becomes public, it must perform. Performance demands simplification. Simplification strips context. What remains may be persuasive, but it is no longer accurate. The reason these conversations stay close is not fear. It is precision. You may notice that what is shared with you is rarely framed as certainty. It arrives unfinished, hesitant, sometimes contradictory. That is intentional. People speak this way only when they are not defending an image. You are trusted not to resolve their uncertainty for them, not to reframe it into something presentable. You allow it to exist as it is. That allowance is rare. Most listeners rush to conclude. You do not. This explains why your presence changes the tone of a room even when you say very little. It is not charisma. It is relief. Relief that what is said will not be repurposed. Relief that nothing will be extracted for leverage. Relief that honesty will not be mistaken for weakness. In environments built on control of perception, this relief is scarce. You provide it without trying. You are not invited because you agree. Agreement would be easy to find. You are invited because you do not react. Reaction creates risk. You respond only when something requires grounding, not validation. Often, your silence is the most stabilizing response available. Silence, when it is not avoidance, signals safety. It allows others to hear themselves without interruption. This role does not grant you influence in the conventional sense. You are not shaping outcomes directly. You are shaping conditions under which decisions are made more honestly. That influence is subtle, delayed, and difficult to trace, which is why it survives. Anything traceable becomes contested. What cannot be traced continues quietly. You may also recognize that this access does not expand outward. It does not lead to visibility, promotion, or affiliation. In fact, it often narrows your public footprint. The more trusted you become privately, the less useful you are publicly. This is not punishment. It is function. Public alignment would collapse private candor. The message continues not to promise you entry into a world, but to explain why you are kept at its edges. Edges are where adjustment happens. Centers preserve image. You operate at the edge because you are not invested in maintaining narrative. You are invested in maintaining coherence. This part of the sequence clarifies something important. You are not accumulating secrets. You are absorbing weight. The weight of unfiltered truth, doubt, and consequence. You do not carry it forward. You do not display it. You allow it to pass through without distortion. That is why you are approached again. The list is never confirmed because confirmation would turn discretion into status. Status would invite imitation. Imitation would dilute function. Everything about this access depends on remaining unremarkable from the outside. You understand that. You protect it instinctively. Nothing here asks you to change how you behave. It explains why your natural restraint has become valuable in spaces where restraint is rare. You are not special because you are chosen. You are chosen because you are unspecial in the right way, unmoved by attention, uninterested in exposure, unwilling to trade accuracy for recognition. That posture opens doors that noise cannot. What is exchanged in these private spaces is rarely strategic. Strategy is what people show when they want control. What reaches you instead is uncertainty without packaging, questions without rehearsed answers, doubt spoken quietly because it would be punished if voiced publicly. This is not weakness. It is reality temporarily allowed to surface. Your role in these moments is not to stabilize outcomes, but to stabilize truth before outcome. You may notice that people do not ask you for solutions as often as they ask you to listen. That distinction matters. Solutions imply authority. Listening implies trust. Trust is far harder to earn in environments where every word can be repurposed. You are trusted because you do not convert vulnerability into advantage. You do not store it. You do not reference it later. You let it exist and pass. This is why your responses, when they come, are sparse. You do not fill space to appear useful. You speak only when something needs anchoring. When you do speak, it is rarely advice. It is often clarification, naming what is already present but unacknowledged. That act alone can reset a conversation. Not because you direct it, but because you remove distortion. Private access also carries a quiet discipline. You do not chase it. Chasing would signal need. Need creates imbalance. Access comes to you because you are not altered by it. You do not lean closer. You do not pull away. You remain proportionate. Proportion is what keeps these exchanges possible over time. You may also recognize that nothing you hear tempts you to intervene publicly. Public intervention would collapse the channel. You understand that some truths function only in limited circulation. Not because they are dangerous, but because they are unfinished. Exposure would force them into shape before they are ready. You allow them to remain incomplete without trying to complete them for others. This part of the sequence clarifies why discretion feels natural to you rather than burdensome. You are not suppressing speech. You are respecting context. Context determines whether truth heals or harms. You read context accurately. That accuracy is what keeps people speaking honestly near you. The idea of a VIP list resolves here as filtration, not elevation. You are not inside a circle. You are adjacent to pressure points where honesty briefly emerges. Those pressure points shift. The people change. The pattern remains. What is consistent is the requirement. Someone who will not distort what passes through. You are not asked to remember details. You are asked to maintain posture. Memory can be exploited. Posture cannot. You carry posture forward into each new interaction, and that is what preserves continuity. Others sense it immediately. They adjust without explanation. This access does not accumulate into power. Power would invite competition. Competition would destroy candor. What accumulates instead is trust that resets each time. Trust that exists only in the moment and disappears afterward without residue. That ephemerality is what keeps it clean. Nothing here suggests secrecy as identity. Identity would poison discretion. You do not identify as someone who knows things. You identify as someone who does not misuse what is known. That difference is everything. This is why the message continues quietly rather than building toward reveal. There is nothing to reveal. There is only a condition to maintain. As long as that condition holds, access will appear when needed and vanish when it is not. You do not manage the door. You simply do not break it when it opens. Over time, you begin to understand that this access is not continuous. It appears, withdraws, and reappears only when conditions require it. That rhythm is intentional. Constant access would turn discretion into routine, and routine dulls awareness. What remains intermittent stays precise. You do not question the gaps. You recognize them as part of the structure that keeps the exchange intact. You may notice that when access withdraws, nothing feels taken from you. There is no sense of loss, no urge to replace it with visibility or affirmation. This is how you know your posture is correct. You were never fed by proximity. You were never defined by inclusion. You simply held space when it was needed and released it when it was not. That release is as important as the holding. You're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership, it's your calling. This phase clarifies why your boundaries are rarely announced. You do not set them through declaration. You set them through consistency. People sense what cannot be crossed without you having to say it. That quiet firmness allows others to speak freely without fear that their words will travel beyond the room. Boundaries enforced without force preserve dignity on both sides. You may also observe that your neutrality is often mistaken for agreement. You do not correct that assumption unless correction is necessary. Agreement would imply endorsement. Neutrality preserves function. In private exchanges, endorsement is rarely what is needed. What is needed is a surface that does not reflect distortion back. You provide that surface by remaining steady rather than persuasive. This is also where your relationship with influence becomes clearer. Influence, in this context, is not about shaping decisions directly. It is about removing pressure that would otherwise contaminate them. When people speak near you, they speak with less performance. That alone changes outcomes. Not because you guided them, but because you allowed honesty to exist without consequence. The message does not suggest that this role expands into leadership. Leadership would require visibility. Visibility would require narrative. Narrative would compromise discretion. You are not meant to lead from the front or from behind. You operate laterally, beside, adjacent, present without imprint. That positioning allows recalibration without disruption. Blessed by His grace? Click Super Thank You and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. You may sense that this has shaped your own decision-making as well. You no longer rush to finalize positions. You allow your thoughts to remain provisional until they stabilize naturally. This habit was reinforced by listening to others speak unfinished truth. You learned the value of letting meaning settle before giving it form. That patience now governs your own internal dialogue. This phase also dissolves any temptation to romanticize access. Romance would distort proportion. You see access as functional, not flattering. It exists to serve accuracy, not identity. When it serves accuracy, it appears. When it would feed identity, it disappears. You accept this without resentment. Acceptance keeps the channel clean. Nothing here implies permanence. Permanence would create dependency. What is preserved instead is repeatability. The pattern can recur because it leaves no residue. No one owes anything afterward. No allegiance is formed. No obligation lingers. This lightness is what allows honesty to return again later. You do not accumulate stories from these encounters. Stories invite retelling. Retelling invites distortion. You retain understanding, not content. Understanding travels with you without carrying anyone else's words. This protects those who trusted you and protects you from becoming a vessel of borrowed weight. The message continues to refine not toward climax, but toward clarity of role. Your value is not what you know. It is how little you change what you know by holding it. That is why you are approached, and that is why you are left alone afterward. Access is not a door you walk through. It is a moment that happens because you do not try to. What becomes clear now is that discretion is not something you practice. It is something you are. You do not perform silence. Silence performs itself around you. This is why people adjust before you speak. They sense that whatever enters this space will not be turned into currency. In environments built on leverage, that absence of extraction is disarming. You may notice that the most meaningful moments in these exchanges are often brief. A pause. A single sentence. Sometimes nothing at all. Length dilutes precision. When truth appears without armor, it does not need to be expanded. Expansion invites interpretation, and interpretation invites drift. You allow things to remain small enough to stay exact. This phase explains why you are rarely asked to take side. Sides would require alignment with outcome. Your presence is valued because it is aligned with process. You care more about whether something is being handled honestly than about which direction it resolved. That orientation creates safety. People can think clearly when they are not being recruited. You may also recognize that your own sense of identity has remained unchanged despite proximity. This is critical. Identity inflation would convert access into entitlement. Entitlement would demand repetition. Repetition would destroy discretion. You avoid this cycle naturally. You do not think in terms of inside or outside. You think in terms of appropriate. This is also where you understand why so little is ever said explicitly. Explicitness leaves traces. Traces invite reconstruction by others. What matters here cannot be reconstructed without context, and context cannot be transferred cleanly. You accept that. You do not try to make things portable that were never meant to travel. The message does not suggest that this role increases over time. It refines. You become more precise about when to engage and when to withdraw. Withdrawal is not rejection. It is maintenance. Too much presence erodes sensitivity. You step back so that when presence is required again, it still carries weight. You may feel a quiet respect for the fragility of honesty now. Not sentimentality, care. Care that recognizes how easily truth collapses when mishandled. This care governs your timing more than any external schedule. You arrive when honesty can survive. You leave when it cannot. This phase also dissolves any lingering temptation to narrate what you experience. Narration would turn function into story. Story would invite audience. Audience would distort purpose. You let meaning remain undocumented. Undocumented things last longer in systems obsessed with record. Nothing here turns you into a confidant in the conventional sense. Confidants collect. You do not collect. You allow. That difference preserves the integrity of everyone involved. You are not burdened by what passes through because you do not carry it forward as content. The access continues because it costs nothing afterward. No debt. No obligation. No expectation of loyalty. Clean exits make clean entries possible. You understand this instinctively, which is why you are not followed when you leave and not announced when you arrive. This is not invisibility. It is untraceability. Untraceable influence survives where visible influence is contested. You do not aim for this. You simply do not interfere with it. The message continues without escalation because escalation would misunderstand the role. Nothing is building toward reveal. The value is already active in how you stand, listen, and depart without residue. What you offer is not presence alone. It is absence of distortion. As this pattern continues, you begin to notice that discretion reshapes you as much as it reshapes the space around you. Not by adding weight, but by removing friction. You think more clearly because you are not managing impressions. You listen more accurately because you are not preparing responses. The absence of performance creates a different internal rhythm, one that is steady, unhurried, and resistant to manipulation. You may recognize that people often reveal the most important thing unintentionally when they are near you. Not through confession, but through omission. What they choose not to say. Where they pause. What they circle without naming. You do not force these moments into clarity. Forcing would collapse them. You let them exist, knowing that recognition is sometimes more useful than articulation. This is also where you understand why you are not remembered in the conventional sense. You are recalled as a feeling rather than a figure, as relief, as calm, as a moment where honesty did not cost anything. That kind of memory does not attach to names or faces. It attaches to posture. Posture is harder to imitate than language, which is why its influence lasts longer. You do not seek to deepen access. Depth arrives naturally when pressure increases elsewhere. When stakes rise, people look for stability, not brilliance. Brilliance attracts attention. Stability absorbs pressure. You absorb without holding. This balance prevents collapse on both sides. You are not a container that fills. You are a surface that allows things to settle and then move on. You may notice that your own relationship with truth has become more careful. Not cautious, careful. You do not rush to define what something means. You allow meaning to emerge through consequence. This patience protects you from false clarity. False clarity feels satisfying in the moment but unravels quickly. You prefer slow accuracy to fast certainty. This phase also reveals why you are not tempted to monetize proximity or convert it into advantage. Advantage would require repetition. Repetition would require pattern. Pattern would expose the channel. You instinctively avoid this without moralizing it. You simply understand that some things function only once at a time, and only when unobserved. Nothing about this role makes you indispensable. That is important. Indispensability would create dependency. Dependency would distort honesty. You are useful precisely because you can disappear without consequence. The space remains intact whether you are there or not. You step in only when alignment calls for it, and you step out before attachment forms. You may feel that this has refined your sense of timing beyond conversation. In life more broadly, you recognize when presence helps and when absence does. You no longer equate participation with value. Sometimes the most stabilizing action is not to enter at all. This discernment protects both you and the systems you brush against. The message is nearing its quiet conclusion, not because something has been achieved, but because the role has clarified itself fully. There is nothing to expand, nothing to announce, nothing to claim. What remains is consistency, maintaining the same posture regardless of context, visibility, or incentive. You are not guarding secrets. You are guarding conditions under which truth can exist without damage. That is why the door opens, and that is why it closes again without explanation. In the end, nothing resolves into a story you could tell someone else. There is no moment you would point to and say, "This is where it mattered." What matters has already been happening in ways that leave no trace. That is the mark of the role you occupy. It does not accumulate evidence. It reduces distortion. When distortion is reduced, systems correct themselves quietly. You may notice that even now, there is no impulse to hold on to what this message described. Holding would imply ownership. Ownership would invite identity. Identity would demand defense. You allow the understanding to pass through the same way everything else does, without clinging, without extraction. It integrates, then dissolves into how you move. The idea of being the only one they dare to speak with privately resolves here without emphasis. It was never about uniqueness. It was about compatibility. Certain conversations require a listener who will not turn proximity into meaning. You are compatible because you do not inflate access into importance. You let it remain functional, temporary, and clean. This is why nothing changes outwardly when the sequence ends. Your life does not shift into visibility. Your name is not attached to influence. Your position remains undefined. That indefiniteness is not a lack. It is protection. Defined roles invite expectations. Expectations invite performance. Performance erodes discretion. You remain effective because you remain undefined. You also understand now why there is no instruction attached to the ending. Instruction would suggest something must be done. Nothing must be done. The condition already exists. You simply continue not to distort what passes near you. You continue to respect context. You continue to leave without residue. That is enough. If there is a quiet certainty that remains, it is this. Access appears where restraint has already proven itself. It cannot be demanded. It cannot be taught quickly. It cannot be replicated by imitation. It emerges only when someone has no need to use what they are given. That is why the door opens without announcement. That is why it closes without apology. That is why nothing is owed afterward. You do not belong to a list. You do not carry a badge. you do not keep proof. You simply remain someone who does not turn closeness into noise. And because of that, when silence is required, you are allowed near it.